Hello, everyone. Imagine a vast arena filled with the deafening roar of a crowd. But this isn't the kind of arena where gladiators fight or athletes compete. It's the arena of life, a space where every choice, every setback, every challenge is on display. In this arena, the crowd isn't just spectators, it's the critics, the doubters, and sometimes the internal voice that whispers, "You can't do this." Now imagine a woman standing alone in that arena. She has no team, no cheering section, no one to catch her if she stumbles. She isn't wearing gleaming armor or holding a polished weapon. Instead, she carries the weight of her responsibilities, her fears, and her relentless determination. She doesn't step into the arena for glory or applause. She steps in because life has left her no other choice. And that choice, that singular act of stepping forward, is courage. Courage in the arena doesn't look the way we often romanticize it. It's not always grand gestures or epic victories. Sometimes it's as simple and as profound as getting out of bed when the weight of the world presses down. It's facing yet another day filled with uncertainty, heartbreak, or exhaustion and saying, "I'm still here." What makes this woman extraordinary is not that she doesn't feel fear, it's that she feels it deeply and moves forward anyway. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's acting in spite of it. It's knowing that failure is a possibility, maybe even a likelihood, and choosing to try anyway. That choice to engage, to fight, to persist is the essence of what it means to stand in the arena. But the arena isn't a fair fight. The woman who fights alone doesn't come armed with the resources or the privilege that others might have. She might be carrying the invisible burdens of grief, trauma, or self-doubt. She might face a society that tells her she isn't enough, smart enough, strong enough, capable enough, and yet she chooses to stand, knowing full well the odds are stacked against her. That's courage. It's important to recognize the toll this courage takes. Standing in the arena alone is exhausting. Every decision, every mistake, every outcome rests squarely on her shoulders. There's no one to share the blame or the burden. The loneliness of the fight can be its own kind of battle. She faces not just the external challenges, but the internal dialogue that questions her every move. What if I fail? What if I'm not enough? What if no one notices the effort I'm putting in? These aren't questions born of weakness. They are the echoes of a society that often values results over resilience, victory over vulnerability. The woman in the arena is forced to contend with the reality that her courage may go unnoticed, her battles unrecognized. And yet she continues, not for validation, but because her fight is about survival, growth, and the hope of a better tomorrow. What makes her stand even more remarkable is that courage doesn't come naturally to anyone. It's not a trait we're born with, it's a muscle we build. For the woman who fights alone, every challenge becomes an opportunity to strengthen that muscle. Every setback is a lesson, every wound a story, and with each step forward she redefines what it means to be brave. Her courage doesn't just impact her own life, it ripples outward. Even if she doesn't realize it, her willingness to stand inspires others. Her story becomes a lifeline for someone else watching from the shadows, someone who feels too afraid to step into their own arena. The woman who fights alone shows us all that bravery isn't about winning, it's about showing up, even when the odds feel insurmountable. And yet, standing in the arena isn't without cost. The woman who fights alone often carries scars, visible or invisible, from battles hard fought. The scars are not signs of failure but of resilience, proof that she faced the storm and endured. Each scar tells a story of courage, of standing tall when it would have been easier to fall. These marks are not blemishes, they are badges of honor. We often idolize stories of triumph, of overcoming, of success. But the woman in the arena reminds us that the fight itself is worth honoring. Her courage is not measured by whether she wins or loses, but by her choice to show up and try, day after day. She embodies the raw, unfiltered essence of bravery, a willingness to face fear, failure, and fatigue with an open heart and an unbroken spirit. In a world that often celebrates perfection and polish, the woman in the arena reminds us of the beauty of imperfection. She doesn't have all the answers. She doesn't always get it right. But she is there, standing, fighting, living. Her courage isn't loud, it doesn't demand attention. It is quiet, steady, and relentless. It is the kind of courage that changes lives, not just hers, but ours too. Silent battles are the heaviest to carry. They are the fights that no one else sees, the ones that unfold behind closed doors, in the quiet hours of the night, or in the midst of a crowded room where everyone assumes you're fine. The weight of these battles is immense because they are born alone, with no one to share the burden or even acknowledge it exists. For the woman fighting these silent battles, every day feels like a war zone. Her struggles may not be visible to others, but they are deeply felt within her. Perhaps she's wrestling with grief, the kind that lingers long after the condolences stop coming. Or maybe it's the crushing weight of anxiety, whispering worst-case scenarios into her ear at every turn. It might be the pressure to be everything to everyone, the perfect mother, the dependable friend, the tireless worker. Whatever the struggle, the one common thread is the silence. There's a unique kind of isolation in fighting battles no one else knows about. It can feel like the world is moving on without you, oblivious to the storm raging inside. People might look at her and see strength or resilience, but what they don't see is the effort it takes to hold everything together. They don't see the nights spent lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how she'll make it through another day. They don't hear the inner dialogue that alternates between self-doubt and self-encouragement. You can't do this. Yes, you can. Just one more day. Silent battles are often dismissed by society because they lack the visible markers of struggle. There's no cast for a broken heart, no bandage for a bruised spirit. When you're fighting a silent battle, it's easy to feel like your pain doesn't count because it's not obvious to others. But make no mistake, the absence of visibility does not mean the absence of suffering. In fact, the invisibility of these battles often makes them even harder to bear. Carrying these battles alone means there's no one to validate the effort it takes just to keep going. There's no cheering section, no one saying, "I see you." I know how hard this is. That lack of recognition can make the fight feel endless and even more isolating. It's as if the silence itself becomes an additional weight, pressing down harder with each passing day. One of the reasons these battles remain silent is fear of judgment, fear of being seen as weak, fear of burdening others. In a world that often values appearances over authenticity, admitting to struggles can feel like a risk. What if people think less of her? What if they pity her? What if they dismiss her pain as insignificant? These questions can be paralyzing, leading her to bury her struggles even deeper. But burying pain doesn't make it go away, it only changes the way it manifests. Silent battles often show up in unexpected ways: the strained smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes, the fatigue she can't shake no matter how much she rests, the sharpness in her tone that masks a well of unspoken hurt. These are the small cracks in the facade, the signs that something deeper is happening beneath the surface. What makes these battles even heavier is the pressure to appear fine. For many women, there's an unspoken expectation to keep it all together, to be strong, to push through without letting anyone see them falter. This expectation doesn't just come from others, it often comes from within. She tells herself she has to be strong, that there's no room for vulnerability, that asking for help is a sign of failure. And so she carries on, adding the weight of these expectations to an already unbearable load. The woman fighting silent battles often becomes a master of disguise. She knows how to smile through the pain, how to laugh when she wants to cry, how to nod and say, "I'm fine," even when she's anything but. This ability to mask her struggles can be both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it allows her to function in a world that doesn't always make space for vulnerability. On the other hand, it reinforces the silence, making it harder for anyone to see the help she might need. What many don't realize is that the act of simply carrying these silent battles is an extraordinary feat of strength. It takes immense courage to wake up every day and face the same struggles without giving up. It takes resilience to continue showing up for others while feeling like you're barely holding yourself together. It takes heart to keep believing in a better future, even when the present feels overwhelming. The weight of silent battles is not something you can measure in pounds or kilograms. It's the weight of invisible expectations, unspoken fears, and unshared pain. It's the weight of carrying not just your own burdens, but often those of others too, because the woman who fights silently is often the same woman who shows up for everyone else. But in the midst of this weight, there is something remarkable about her. She keeps going. Even when it feels like the weight will crush her, she takes another step. Not because it's easy, but because she has to. Because somewhere deep inside her, there's a spark of hope that refuses to be extinguished. That spark is her quiet rebellion against the silence, her defiance against the weight, and her reminder that even the heaviest battles don't last forever. In a world that often equates strength with invincibility, vulnerability can feel like the ultimate act of defiance. It goes against every instinct to protect, to hide, to guard the softest parts of ourselves. Yet, there is an undeniable power in the very thing we are taught to fear. Vulnerability is not a weakness, it is a profound strength, a strength that lies in our willingness to be seen, to be real, and to face life with an open heart, even when it hurts. Vulnerability is often misunderstood. Many see it as exposing your wounds, admitting defeat, or relinquishing control. But true vulnerability is not about surrendering, it's about stepping forward, even when there are no guarantees. It's the courage to say, I don't have all the answers. It's the honesty to admit, I'm struggling. And it's the audacity to open yourself up to connection, knowing that it comes with the risk of rejection, judgment, or heartbreak. What makes vulnerability so powerful is that it requires us to confront fear head-on. Fear of failure, fear of being seen as imperfect, fear of not being enough. These fears are universal, yet we often pretend they don't exist. We wear masks, build walls, and project an image of control because it feels safer than letting the world see who we truly are. But the truth is, those masks and walls don't protect us, they isolate us. They keep us from the very things we need most: connection, understanding, and love. The woman who embraces vulnerability is someone who understands this. She knows that her strength doesn't come from pretending she's unbreakable, it comes from acknowledging that she's human. It takes immense courage to stand in front of others, or even in front of yourself, and say, this is me. These are my scars. This is where I'm still healing. Vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, it's a testament to her bravery. It's a declaration that her worth is not tied to perfection but to authenticity. There is strength in vulnerability because it invites growth. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we open the door to learning, healing, and transformation. Admitting that we don't have it all figured out creates space for curiosity and exploration. Acknowledging our pain allows us to process it, rather than burying it where it can fester. Sharing our struggles with others gives them permission to do the same, creating bonds that are deeper and more meaningful than surface-level interactions. But vulnerability isn't easy. It requires trust in others, trust in ourselves, and trust in the process. And trust doesn't come without risk. The woman who dares to be vulnerable knows that not everyone will honor her openness. She may encounter judgment, dismissal, or betrayal. But she also knows that vulnerability is not about the response she receives, it's about her choice to show up fully, regardless of the outcome. That choice is her power. What's remarkable about vulnerability is how it transforms relationships. When we allow ourselves to be seen as we truly are, we create the conditions for genuine connection. Vulnerability strips away pretense and invites empathy. It says, I trust you enough to show you my truth. And in doing so, it encourages others to reciprocate. It's in these moments of shared honesty that real intimacy is born, not just in romantic relationships, but in friendships, family bonds, and even professional connections. Vulnerability also has the power to reshape our relationship with ourselves. When we stop hiding from our emotions, when we allow ourselves to feel joy, pain, fear, and hope fully, we begin to understand who we are at our core. We learn to accept the messy, imperfect parts of ourselves instead of fighting against them. This self-acceptance is a form of strength that no external validation can replicate. It's a quiet, steady confidence that says, "I am enough, just as I am." And while vulnerability may feel like stepping into the unknown, it's also where we find our greatest moments of clarity and purpose. It's in the willingness to take risks that we discover what truly matters to us. It's in admitting our fears that we find the courage to move forward. It's in opening ourselves up to others that we realize we are never truly alone. The woman who embodies vulnerability is not immune to pain. She feels it deeply. But she doesn't let that pain define her. Instead, she uses it as a bridge to understanding, to connection, to resilience. Her strength lies not in avoiding the hard truths of life, but in facing them with grace and authenticity. By embracing her vulnerability, she becomes a beacon of hope for others. A reminder that strength isn't about being unshakable, it's about being willing to stand tall, even when the ground beneath her trembles. What makes vulnerability so extraordinary is its duality. It is both the softest and the strongest thing we can offer. It is the crack in the armor that lets the light in. It is the trembling voice that speaks the truth. It is the open hand extended in trust, even when it might be slapped away. And in a world that often values power and perfection above all else, the choice to be vulnerable is nothing short of revolutionary.